It's not the national debt, it's not the value of the stock market, it's $255 trillion. This $255 trillion was sitting in a single obscure account at the Federal Reserve. It was cash held by entities outside the banking system, and for the past 2 years almost nobody could explain why it was there. Now that $255 trillion buffer is disappearing, it's down over 85%. It's draining faster than anyone predicted. And the real story isn't the $25 trillion. It's what happens when the balance finally hits zero. To understand the crisis happening now, we have to go back. This story is about the plumbing of the entire financial system. You won't find it on the evening news. You won't hear politicians debate it. But this plumbing determines the cost of your car loan, your mortgage, and the stability of your bank. At the center of it all is a little-known tool called the overnight reverse repurchase agreement, or reverse repo for short. It's not for you, it's not for me, it's for a handful of giant players, mostly money market funds. These funds, or MMFs, are where large corporations park their cash. Think of it as a giant high-security savings account for companies like Apple or Microsoft. These MMFs manage trillions of dollars, and they have one rule: keep the money safe. Their problem is finding a place to put all that cash. They used to lend it to banks, but after the 2008 financial crisis, new rules made it expensive for banks to hold that much cash, so the MMFs were stuck. They were drowning in dollars with nowhere to put them. This is where the Federal Reserve steps in. The Fed is the banker to the banks. It's also the ultimate safe place to park money. So the Fed created the reverse repo facility. Here's how it works simply. A money market fund has $1 billion in extra cash. It lends that $1 billion to the Fed just for one night. In return, the Fed gives the MMF a U.S. Treasury bill as collateral. It's like the Fed is handing over its watch to hold onto your dollar. The next morning, the deal unwinds. The Fed gives the $1 billion back to the MMF plus interest. It's the safest, most secure overnight parking lot for cash on planet Earth. For years, this parking lot was mostly empty. Its balance was near $0. Then March 2020 happened. The world shut down. The U.S. government needed to act. It injected trillions of dollars into the economy. Stimulus checks hit bank accounts. Business loans were given out at the same time. The Federal Reserve started its own program, quantitative easing, or QE. The Fed bought $120 billion in bonds every single month. It was creating money from nothing and pumping it directly into the system. This created a tidal wave of cash. Trillions upon trillions of new dollars washed over the entire financial world, and just like before, that money found its way to the money market funds. The MMFs were suddenly sitting on $5 trillion in cash. The banks still didn't want it. The system was breaking. There was so much cash that interest rates threatened to go negative. You would have had to pay a bank to hold your money. The Fed had to open an emergency valve. So on March 17, 2021, they made a small technical change. They uncapped the reverse repo facility. They essentially told the MMFs, bring us all your cash, we'll take it. And the MMFs did. This is the key moment. The reverse repo balance exploded. In March 2021, it was $1 billion. By August 2021, it hit $1 trillion. By December 2022, it peaked at $255 trillion for 2 years. Financial commentators pointed at this $255 trillion number. They called it a crisis. They called it a ticking time bomb. They were wrong. The $255 trillion wasn't the crisis. It was a symptom. It was just a measure of all the excess cash sloshing around the system with no place to go. It was a giant inert pile of money sitting safely at the Fed. The real story, the real crisis, started when the number began to fall. Which brings us to 2023. Inflation had hit 91% in June 2022. The Fed's money printing had worked too well. Now they had to reverse course. They slammed on the brakes. They stopped printing money, and they started destroying it. This process is called quantitative tightening, or QT. Instead of buying bonds, the Fed started selling them. It lets $95 billion in bonds roll off its balance sheet every single month. This is a giant vacuum sucking $95 billion out of the financial system. But it raised a critical question. Where exactly would that $95 billion come from? This is the part nobody understands. You have to think of the US financial system as having two giant buckets of cash. Bucket 1 is the reverse repo facility. This is the excess cash. The $255 trillion parking lot. Bucket 2 is bank reserves. This is the working cash. It's the money banks need to clear checks, issue loans, and operate daily. The Fed's $95 billion vacuum was pointed at both buckets. At first this was fine. All the money came out of bucket 1, the excess parking lot. The RRP balance started to fall from $255 trillion to $2 trillion, then $15 trillion. This was exactly what the Fed wanted. They were draining the excess, but then something else was happening. The US government was running a massive $17 trillion deficit. It had to issue trillions in new treasury bills to pay its bills. The money market funds saw this. They said, why would we park our cash at the Fed for 53% interest when we can buy a new T-bill and get 54% interest? So they did. They took their money out of the RRP parking lot and lent it to the US Treasury. This accelerated the drain. The $255 trillion buffer, the cushion for the entire system, was evaporating. As of November 2025, that balance is just $300 billion. It has dropped by over 88%. The excess cash is almost gone. So what happens when bucket 1 hits $0? The $95 billion per month vacuum doesn't stop. It just swings over and points directly at bucket 2. It will start sucking cash directly from bank reserves. The money banks need to live. This is where the alarm bells start screaming, because we have seen this movie, and it ends in disaster. The year was 2019. The Fed was doing the exact same thing. It was pulling money from the system with QT back. Then there was no $25 trillion RRP buffer, so the QT vacuum was draining bank reserves directly. Fed officials thought they knew how much cash banks needed. They guessed the safe level was $15 trillion. They were wrong. On September 17, 2019, the system snapped. Banks woke up and didn't have enough cash for their daily operations. They panicked. They tried to borrow from each other in the overnight lending market, but no one had cash to lend. The interest rate in this repo market, normally 2%, spiked instantly to 5%, then 8%. By midday, it hit 10%. The plumbing of the global financial system had ceased. It was a full-blown crisis. The Fed was forced into an emergency U-turn. They stopped QT immediately. They had to inject $500 billion in emergency loans just to get the system unstuck. They broke the system, which brings us back to today. The $255 trillion buffer is now just $300 billion. It is draining at a rate of $20 billion per day. It is on pace to hit $0 by early 2026. The Fed is still running its $95 billion vacuum QT. They are still sucking money out. And just like in 2019, they are flying blind. Now that buffer is gone, the margin for error is zero. The crisis was never the $25 trillion number. The crisis is the drain. It's the countdown to zero. The Fed is playing a high-stakes game of chicken with the entire banking system. So what happens next? When that RRP balance hits $0, we go live. The $95 billion vacuum will start pulling only from bank reserves. There are two possible outcomes. Path A. The Fed is perfect. They are surgical. They stop QT at the exact moment reserves are sufficient. The system stabilizes, the plumbing holds, and they declare victory. Path B. They are human. They miss just like they did in 2019. They pull $1 too many from the system. One major bank fails to find overnight cash. The repo rate spikes from 5% to 15% in a single afternoon. Credit freezes. The stock market crashes 10% in a day. And the Fed is forced into another humiliating U-turn. They'll have to stop QT and start quantitative easing all over again. They will be forced to print trillions of new dollars to fix the problem that created the $25 trillion mystery. Is really a $0 countdown, and the clock is ticking. So which will it be? Path A, a smooth perfect landing by the Fed, or Path B, a repeat of the 2019 repo crisis, but bigger? Drop your prediction in the comments below and subscribe, because we will revisit this the moment that our RP balance officially hits zero.